It's recording, but it's not streaming. Okay, we'll go with that. Okay, let's get started. We'll get it online at some point or another. So we're in 2 Kings, really 16 today, but I wanted to kind of finish off what was going on in 15. And just to kind of remind you a little bit of what's going on here. The northern kingdom, some people get a little confused about this, but there's the northern kingdom of Israel, north, and the southern kingdom of Judah. And that's kind of important when you're reading through, 1st and 2nd Kings to really kind of remember what's going on, because there's kings that interlap with each other and that type of stuff. But the northern kingdom of Israel is on the cusp of disaster, and it's been playing with fire for far too long. Every one of its kings has been evil. And that's basically 200 years of idolatry at this point. But lately, things have become even worse, and the kings are being murdered at an unbelievable pace. If we're looking at the north, and we see if I could, hopefully this works. I had some problems before the service. I'm really hoping it doesn't act up on me. But here's Zechariah. Zechariah rules for 6 months. And he's murdered. The next guy, Shallum, he rules for 1 month, and he's murdered. Becoming a king of Israel is like a death sentence at this point. All these guys are getting killed, and there's really little of anything going on in dynasties. But over in the south, and this is where I've been having the problems technologically, so hopefully this works. Okay. And we're looking at the southern kingdom. Do you remember in the north we had a few different dynasties? Anyone remember the first king of the north? Anyone remember the first king of the north? Who was the first king of the north in Israel? When Israel split right after Solomon, there was his son Rehoboam, and under Rehoboam's reign, the kingdom split. And this guy took the northern kingdom of Israel. He took 10 tribes in the north and left the king of Judah with 1 tribe. Who is this guy? The first king of Israel. Ahab is the most notorious. So I think you've answered that before. I think you answered the same way. Someone answered the same way. Yeah, you've got them. They're in there. They're in the catalog. Ahab is really one of the worst guys. So it's not a wrong answer to say Israel is kind of known by Ahab's evil rule. But Matt, Jeroboam, the first Jeroboam 1. And meanwhile, down here in the south, these are the kings from this dynasty. This king and all of his sons rule in Judah. It's an easy one. This is a really easy one. David. She's like, David? Of course it's David. Yeah, it's David. But, listen, the last 100 years haven't been so good in Judah in the south. The house of David was let's try this again. The house of David was nearly wiped out under the reign of Athaliah here. You remember you remember Ahaziah. Remember Ahaziah got murdered? You remember the famous words that were spoken to Ahaziah? Treachery. Oh, Ahaziah, treachery. We're going back a little bit now. And this was under the rule of Jehu. Jehu came in and he wiped out his king and he wiped out Ahaziah. Then Athaliah comes in and she wipes out the entire family, almost the entire family except Joash. Well, things don't get a whole lot better because Amaziah ends up being imprisoned and eventually murdered. Azariah ends up becoming a leper because of his pride, and he's forced to have his son Jotham take over his duties. And that's kind of where we pick up. That's kind of where we are. We're starting around 750 today, and it's not the best situation at all in Israel, not in the least bit. Jotham has to take over for his father because of his father's pride and idolatry. And that's kind of what we see here in 2 Kings 15. In the second year of Pekah, the son of Remaliah. Now I want you to just remember that for a second. It's the second year of Pekah, the son of Remaliah, who is the king of Israel. Now, before we read that, I want to orient you. So I remember when I went to Israel in 2014, we got to Megiddo, overlooking the valley of Megiddo, or the valley of Armageddon. And I remember the guy saying, "Let me orient you," because I'm thinking, I don't know where north and south is here. I don't know where east and west. I've never been here before. I don't really know what I'm looking at. And we looked out over the valley, and now I know where we are. Now I've gotten, or you ever go to New York City? You go to New York City and you hit some of those streets down by John's of Bleecker Street. I know you've eaten there. Fantastic pizza. Way better than Mama Cuzzy's pizza at Aldi's. Okay. I don't know who would even think that would even broccoli pizza or cauliflower pizza or whatever like that is. Whoever would eat that stuff. I don't know what, I don't trust a person like that. You have to, John's is way better. You have to recognize that. But anyway, you go down there, right? And you walk out on the street and, you've got to orient yourself. Or you get out of the subway. You ever get out of a subway? Paul, you ever get out of a subway terminal and you're like, okay, let me figure out where we are. And you're like, okay, I see, like, say 34th and 8th, but I still don't know which direction east and north. You got to look up a little. Okay, there's 35th. Now I know that's north. You're orienting yourself. Let's orient ourselves a little bit in the passage. Second year of Pekah, the son of Remaliah. Now check this out. We're going to come back here and we're going to try this again. Pekah, every time I try this, I'm like crossing my fingers or whatever. Pekah, the son of Remaliah, is here. He starts at 752. The second year of Pekah, the son of Remaliah, is like 751 or 750. We're going to measure these rules that we're looking at tonight against Pekah's rule in the north, the son of Remaliah. And you might remember the name Pekah, son of Remaliah, and if you don't, you will after tonight, because I'm going to show you a few things about that. But anyway, so if it's the second year of Pekah, the son of Remaliah, and he starts at 752, we're calling it around the year 750 that Jotham begins his reign. You see that? I want you to notice also that Azariah's reign goes for 10 more years after Jotham starts. So there's a co-regency for 10 years. We'll talk about that just for a second tonight, although you kind of know what's up with that. So did I stop that? No. Okay. And the second year of Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, which I'm saying is the year 750. 750, that's what we're saying. The second year of Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, Jotham, son of Uzziah, Jotham, son of Azariah, king of Judah, down in the south, became king. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jerusha, the daughter of Zadok. So if we come back to and I've got Jotham in yellow here. He reigns 16 years. Now we have on our timeline 750 to 731. How many years is that? That's like 19, 20 years. We're looking at Ahaz's rule. So we're talking about his sole reign here. The time of his sole reign, that's what 750 to 735 range. So he's 25 years old. He reigns 16 years. That's talking about the sole rule that he has. He rules alongside of his father. On the first 10 years, he rules alongside of his father. Technically, Azariah is still the king, but Azariah is a leper. He can't really carry out his functions. And so Jotham is still technically king, and he's still kind of doing stuff there. But then at the end, you'll see his son Ahaz takes over, and Jotham is only about 40 at that time. So this is a short. In ancient times, it's a short rule from about 25 to about the time he's 40. So his reign is good, but it's not great. He did what was right in the sight of the Lord. He did according to all that his father Uzziah had done, Azariah. Only the high places were not taken away. Talked about that before. Did you read ahead? No, you were just thinking of only the high places were not taken away. The people still sacrificed and burned incense on the high places. He built the upper gate of the house of the Lord. So this guy follows the Lord, but he also allows compromise. So he continues to allow the high places of worship to exist. The people continue to act corruptly in 2 Chronicles 27. On the positive, he does repair the temple complex. He reinforces Jerusalem. He fortifies the city walls. He has success in battles. We could read about all that in 2 Chronicles 27, which I just decided not to go through tonight. But then his rule comes to an end in verses 36 through 38. Now the rest of the acts of Jotham and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? I just kind of summarized some of that stuff. In those days, the Lord began to send Rezin, king of Aram, and Aram is also known as, this nation is also known as what? Syria, just like Canada is also known as the 51st state. Yes, correct. So in those days, the Lord, they booed our national anthem last night. Those Canadians, I'm rooting against them. I'm rooting for Finland on tomorrow afternoon. But anyway, talking about hockey for any of you hockey people. In those days, the Lord began to send Rezin, king of Aram, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, that's the king of Israel. These two kings against Judah, and Jotham slept with his fathers, and he was buried with his fathers in the city of David his father, and Ahaz his son became king in his place. So we don't see a whole lot about his rule here in 2 Kings, but what we do see is a new threat lurking. And you might remember that Israel and Syria, Rezin, the king of Aram, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, these two guys have kind of come together at this point. They've formed a coalition. And does anyone remember why they formed a coalition? Does anyone remember the threat that was kind of coming in that caused these guys to form a coalition? I hear some whisperings. By the way, that's how you whisper, Roxanne. It sounds like this when you whisper. It doesn't sound like this. This is not a whisper. This is a whisper. Just so you know. This is something that happens in our house. I did hear the whisperings first. I'm going to come here first. Was it Assyria? It's Assyria. So if we're looking at this map, and remember we talked about big cats and tiny little mouse. We talked about Tom and Jerry, even though Jerry won. We all know Jerry would have lost. We all know that cat would have caught that mouse and ripped him to pieces. We know that. But cartoons are cartoons. So we see Judah, who is a tiny little mouse, and Israel, who's a tiny little mouse, and Syria is a tiny little mouse. And then if we zoom out, we're going to see a big cat. The Assyrians. This is the Assyrian Empire. So check this out. Big cat. Zoom in. Tiny little mice. Big cat. Tiny little mice. Should I do it again? So we have these little mice that need to, you put enough little mice together, and maybe you stand a chance when the big cat sends his army down into the Levant, into the land of Canaan, into this area. And so Aram and Israel join together, and they want Judah to be part of their alliance. But Judah's like, I'm not fighting against the big cat. I'm not fighting against Tom. I'm just little Jerry. I'm not gonna survive that battle. And so these guys, Judah decides not to join that coalition. And how do you think that makes Israel and Syria feel? They're not happy. They're not happy, especially Syria, because they're close. They're like right on the border at this point with the Assyrian Empire. So Aram is not happy. Syria is not happy. And Israel's not happy. And so these two kings plan to attack Judah and replace its king. But then Jotham dies, and his son Ahaz takes over. Check this out. In the 17th year of Pekah, the son of Remaliah, and you remember our timeline, Pekah down here, second to last on the bottom, 752. So if 752 to 732, if 752 is the first year of Pekah's reign, then the 17th year puts us somewhere around 735. That's kind of how we're on Ahaz now. That's kind of how we look at the timeline here. That's kind of how we figure some of these things out. We actually use the Bible to figure out what happened in history. That's how we know that there was a creation. That's how we know that there was a worldwide flood, because we have a record book, an historical record book that tells us what happened. And though we may not always know all the details, we may not be able to reconcile all the details, the record book is right, and it's 100% right, and we're not. In the 17th year of Pekah, the son of Remaliah, Ahaz, the son of Jotham, king of Judah, became king. Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. And he did not do what was right in the sight of the Lord his God, as his father David had done. So this guy, he becomes king 735. He's 20 years old. He rules as a co-regent, and it's a tumultuous time, and he's evil. He's an evil king. Check it out in verses 3 and 4. He walked in the way of the kings of Israel. Do we remember what the kings of Israel did? Tell me what the kings of Israel, what was their great evil, these kings? I know we got a smaller group tonight. What was the problem with the kings of Israel and their worship? How they worshiped the Lord? I guess I'm going to come back to Abby. I'll give you, go ahead. Yeah, the idolatrous worship sites up here in Dan and down here in Bethel. And Jeroboam, one, built those worship sites for what reason? Someone else? She's like, I got this one though, man. He built these worship sites. Why did he build them? To keep the people from going to Jerusalem and worshiping the Lord. And yep, exactly. So they have this idolatrous worship, and what we're seeing here is this guy walked in the way of the kings of Israel, Ahaz. And it's even worse because he adopts all these idolatrous gods and even made, look at this, he had the gall to make his son pass through the fire, according to the abominations of the nations whom the Lord had driven out from before the sons of Israel. When you worship some of these gods of Ammon and Moab, now Ammon and Moab are over on they're over here on the Transjordan. So if we're gonna look at this map, we're gonna kind of really orient ourselves again. The Jordan River is going to divide this. The Jordan River Valley, which is one of the lowest places on earth, kind of divides these two like mountain ranges and these two lands. And off to the right side, off to the east, are the lands of Moab and Ammon, and they worship Molech and Chemosh. And they would take their children in times of desperation, and sometimes not, and they would place them in the hands of an idol, and they would then, instead of sacrificing an animal, they would murder their children as a burnt offering to one of these false gods. This is a complete abomination. And actually, you could read about a condemnation of this in Leviticus 18. You shall not give any of your offspring to offer them to Molech, nor shall you profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. So you have this command against offering your children as a burnt offering to a false god. Of course, Obviously, you can see what's on the page there next. You shall not lie with a male as one lies with a female. That also is an abomination. Probably something our culture should understand. I hear people say, oh, homosexuality is never condemned in the Bible. It's like, man, you got to read your Bible. You really got to read it. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about this offering of your children to an idol as a burnt offering. And that's what Ahaz does here. It's a complete abomination. Ahaz is an evil, evil king. He sacrificed and burned incense on the high places and on the hills and under every green tree. This is one of the worst kings Judah's ever seen. He probably offers his son as a sacrifice during some troublesome times in the conflict between Israel and Syria and Judah. And he expects Molech to deliver him. But he doesn't just worship Molech, he worships all types of foreign gods. He worships Baal, according to 2 Chronicles 28:3. He worships Asherah under every green tree. One guy says this, he says, Ahaz is, quote, a dedicated polytheist in the hopes that some God may deliver him from his trouble. That's Ahaz. That's Ahaz. The situation is bad. This king is an evil, idolatrous man. And so he faces trouble during his reign. He faces continued trouble with Israel and Syria in verses 5 and 6. Then Rezin, king of Aram, Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, remember, Syria and Israel. They wanted to make an alliance, remember? This is called the Syro-Ephraimite War, for anyone who's interested in any historical. Syria and Israel band together. They want to fight against Assyria. They ultimately come against Judah. Okay? And they fight Assyria as well, but we'll talk about that in a second. Rezin, the king of Aram, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, come up to Jerusalem. So they attack Judah to wage war, and they besieged Ahaz, but could not overcome him. What does it mean to siege? What happens in siege warfare? Someone give me something. Brittany. They bring an army, they surround the city, they block off all the trade, and if they want homemade fresh bagels, they can't get them, So Michael wouldn't be able to have brought his bagels this morning. And by the way, they were fantastic. They were absolutely fantastic. Man, I wanted more than one. I was like, I ate one, and I'm like, man. And I dad taxed one of my kids. I ate half of one of theirs. It was fantastic. But anyway, you wouldn't be able to get bagels in and out of the city. You wouldn't be able to get food, or fortunately, you could get water. Because, anyone remember why? Eventually, not just yet, eventually you could get water out. Maybe this siege is why it happened later on. A later king, Hezekiah, redirected the war. We'll read about that in a few weeks. But anyway, so they surround the city until they starve the people out, and then when the people are about to die, they go in and the people come out in desperation, and or you just starve them all to death, and that's it. But they could not overcome Ahaz, we see here, in this Syro-Ephraimite war. At that time, Rezin, king of Aram, recovered Elath for Aram and cleared the Judeans out of Elath entirely, and the Arameans came to Elath and have lived there to this day. So I'll talk about that just in 1 second. Basically what we read about in 2 Chronicles here is that they attack Judah and they take a large portion of the land and they murder 120,000 people from the people of Judah in one day. 2 Chronicles 28:6. They carry 200,000 people away. So they're somewhat successful. These two nations are somewhat successful when they attack Israel, when they attack Judah. They take 200,000 people captive. They ultimately release those people, 2 Chronicles 28:9 and 10. And they go all the way down. They take all the land all the way down to this port city here. You read Elath, or modern-day Eilat, or you might read about a town in the Bible called Ezion-Geber, and that was important because it was the Gulf of Aqaba there, which kind of connects you to the Red Sea, and you'd have trade, foreign trade and all that. They took all that land. They took all of it. But they're not able to take the one city they really want to take, which is Jerusalem. And they're not able to replace its king. We can read more about this. Anyone know what prophet mentions these two kings? I'm going to make it easy. I'm going to give you a hint. I'm going to give you a big hint. Unless someone has it first. I'm willing to offer a big... You're going to ruin it. You know it? You think so? You tell me if it's right afterwards. Okay, be honest. Yeah, you tell her... yeah, you got it. Yeah, I saw it. I'm a good lip reader. I was watching the video of Trump's son when he shook Biden's hand. I could lip read it, and he was like, "It's on." No, I don't know what he said, but I know what you said. I'll give you a hint. Anyone has a guess before I give you what prophet? I'm going to give you a major hint. What major prophet refers? Now that limits us. When we talk about major prophets, we're only talking really 4 major prophets here. What major? Anyone know the major prophets? You got 2 of them? I'm talking about books, major prophetic books. Okay. What are the major? Let's start with the major prophetic books. What are they? The 2 kings. Is that your question? Yes, but I'm coming back to that question. What are the 4 major prophets? Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. We're going to say Daniel. We're going to call him a major prophet because that's how we divide it. Of course, Lamentations is one of those books in the major prophet section. Of those major prophets, which one mentions Rezin, king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah? Now, we know Daniel doesn't. Daniel's like way later. We kind of know, and we're really cheating now, because now I'm down to 3. And if you think hard enough, there's another one that couldn't possibly be mentioning him because he's way later too. But I'm not going to tell you which one yet. So which king? We have which prophet? We have one of 3. You get a 33% and a third. Brittany? It's Isaiah! Ding, 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 ding. Yes, it's a bingo. Anyway, it is Isaiah. Let's go there. Let's go to Isaiah 7. Check this out. Isaiah 7. So these 2 kings, they come up against Jerusalem to fight against it, and Ahaz is terrified, but God sends him a message through Isaiah, and he tells him that these 2 enemies will not stand. I know we're going through some stuff. I understand. This is a Bible study. This is more of a Bible study than a sermon tonight, so just understand that. Taking notes does help. It really does help, because it can get a little, even for me, it can get a little confusing. Wait, which king are we talking about? And what was his dad's name? And I get it. I understand it. I have notes too, Now, it came about in the days of Ahaz, that's the king we're looking at, the son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah, that Rezin, the king of Aram, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, remember these guys, Rezin and Pekah? Rezin, the king of Aram, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, went up to Jerusalem to wage war against it, but could not conquer it. We just read about that, right? Now check this out. When it was reported to the house of David, saying, the Arameans have camped in Ephraim. These guys have gathered together. His heart and the hearts of his people shook as the trees of the forest shake with the wind. They're terrified. Then the Lord said to Isaiah, go out now to meet Ahaz, you and your son Jashub, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool on the highway to the fuller's field. Go to this spot and meet him, and say to him, take care and be calm. Have no fear, and do not be faint-hearted because of these 2 stubs of smoldering firebrands. They're nothing. They're not big trees. They're little mice. They're little mice. These 2 stubs of smoldering firebrands on account of the fierce anger of Rezin of Aram and the son of Remaliah. I'm not even going to say his name at this point. I already said it, but I'm not going to repeat it. We're going to just call him the son of Remaliah. this disgusting king who banded together against Israel with Israel's enemies, or formerly Israel's enemy. Because Aram with Ephraim, Syria with Israel, that's Ephraim is another name for Israel. Aram is another name for Syria. Because Aram with Ephraim and the son of Remaliah, again, we don't call him Pekah here for at least the second time, has planned evil against you, saying, let us go up against Jerusalem and terrorize it and make for ourselves a breach in its walls and set up the son of Tabiel as king in the midst of it. Let's replace its king. Let's conquer Jerusalem and install a king who will fight with us. Thus says the Lord God, it shall not stand, nor shall it come to pass. In other words, you shall not pass. One of those things. For the head of Aram is Damascus, and the head of Damascus, that's the capital city, Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin, the king of Syria. Now, within another 65 years, Ephraim will be shattered. They won't even exist, so that it is no longer a people. And the head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is the son of Remaliah. Again, not even naming him, son of Remaliah. If you will not believe, you surely shall not last. It's a call for King Ahaz to place his faith in the Lord and trust in the Lord and not man. Don't be afraid of these two smoldering firebrands, these two little mice. If you will not believe, you will not last, you will not stand. And then in that context, we see one of the most famous prophecies in all of human history, the virgin birth of a Messiah. So next time you read Isaiah, this is some of the context behind it. Next time you read that virgin birth, this is some of the context of it. Well, anyway, what do you think Ahaz does? Do you think Ahaz trusts in the Lord? From what do you think? You would think he would trust in the Lord a little bit. But, what's that? No, I thought, no? Okay. You would think there would be some trust in the Lord there. Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria. You know what? I think I'm going to take my chances with Assyria. Trust in the Lord? Listen, I trust in all these gods. Chemosh, Molech, all the different gods. I remember he's been worshiping them. But I rather than trust in the Lord and the Lord alone, I'm going to go, this is what I'm going to do. I've got to fight against these little mice. And I'm going to call on the big cat. I'm going to call on the big cat. Little mice. Remember? Big cat. And he calls on the big cat. He sends messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, saying, I am your servant and your son. In other words, I'm going to basically be a vassal king. I'm basically going to be a servant king. I'll pay you money. I'll do whatever. I am your servant and your son. Come up and deliver me from the hand of the king of Aram and from the hand of the king of Israel who are rising up against me. Ahaz took the silver and gold. Ahaz took the silver and gold that was found in the house of the Lord and in the treasuries of the king's house and sent a present to the king of Assyria. You know what? I'm not going to trust in the Lord. You know what I'm going to do instead? I'm going to rob the offerings of the people. And I'm going to use those offerings to pay off, to bribe a powerful ally. Man, it's like the pastors today. Now, fortunately, in our situation, we have something that the American government thought of a couple hundred years ago called checks and balances. Some parties don't really understand that concept today, some political parties, but we have something called checks and balances. And we have checks and balances here in this church. And so I don't have access to the money. Even if I wanted the money, I don't think I could get it. I'd have to try pretty hard to get it. But some pastors, they have access to all the money. And it's like the pastor who robs the church people to pay off his private debts. That's kind of like what it is. Or maybe you might say it's like the Christian who robs God of what rightfully belongs to God, maybe his offerings that he should be giving to God, to pay off his life of luxury. Let me tell you something. I could live real nice with some extra money. With the money that we give to the Lord, I could do some stuff. Now listen, I couldn't buy a Lambo. That I couldn't do. But I could go on a nice vacation, I'm sure, and probably a real nice one. But listen, we don't rob God for personal reasons. And that's what Ahaz did. He robbed God. He bribed a foreign leader. And this guy's an idolater in the first place. We shouldn't really expect a whole lot different from him. But he was told to trust in the Lord. And what does he do? He trusts in what? Man. Or money or whatever. Man. He trusts in man. You ever do that? You ever do that in a situation where it's like, you know what? I'm going to go and I'm going to manipulate a situation to affect the outcome. Oh, it's the same thing. It's the same thing that Ahaz did, maybe at a smaller level. Well, anyway, he bribes the big cat. He bribes the kickback. Come in here and wipe out these little mice who are giving this little mouse a problem. And this little mouse is your son, and this little mouse is your servant. And so the king of Assyria listened to him. And the king of Assyria went up against Damascus and captured it and carried the people of it away into exile to Kir and put Rezin to death. He killed him. He conquers Damascus, the capital of Syria, and takes over its land right around the time of 732 BC this happens. He kills the king of Syria. He exiles the people. And so Syria, we're going to go from that big cat down into that little mouse. Syria is no more. 732 BC. And what else is going to happen is 10 years after that, Israel will be no more. Because that same king, Assyria, is going to come in and wipe out the Israelites. And once he wipes out Syria, and once he wipes out Israel, what do you think he wants next? What do you think they're going to want next? You think they're going to just be like, we're going to stop? We're good? No. They're going to want Judah. And you might remember a king named Sennacherib. And you might remember, which we'll read about during the days of Hezekiah, not many days hence, you might read about a guy who comes in and says, God sent me here to take your people and to take your city. You remember that? Don't speak to us in the language of the people. No, I came to speak to not just to your king, but to the language of everyone, the men who are doomed to eat their own dung and drink their own urine. You remember that? Yeah, that's coming. That's coming because of this. Because of this. Ahaz invited all this in. Ahaz did all this. This is not a good king. This guy is the Joe Biden of the 8th century BC. I mean, it's terrible. He's a terrible, terrible king. He's not good. He's not a good king. Sorry. I can say it now and still not be disrespecting he's not a ruler anymore. He's a terrible, terrible president, and this guy's a terrible, terrible king. But Ahaz has saved himself. He should have turned to the Lord. He should have worshipped the Lord, his God of Israel. Instead, he turns to the idols. He turns to the king of Assyria, and he turns to the idols that he finds in Syria. So these guys who get wiped out, in the ancient thinking, it's like, listen, the gods of that nation conquered the gods of this nation, so that God is more powerful. The Assyrian God is powerful. Well, what Ahaz does is he goes up and he meets the king of Assyria up at Damascus, And he sees the idols that are in Damascus, the gods of Syria, the gods who have just been conquered. And he's like, these gods, they got it. These are the gods. And he loves what he sees with these conquered foreign gods. He sees the altar of Hadad there. And Hadad is like the Syrian version of the Canaanite god Baal, basically Syrian Baal. And he builds an altar in Jerusalem, just like that idolatrous altar. And we'll read through this quickly because we do have to. I'm a little behind schedule here. I might have to go a few minutes over tonight. I'll try not to. Now King Ahaz went to Damascus to meet Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, who had just conquered Syria, and saw the altar which was at Damascus. And King Ahaz sent to Urijah the priest the pattern of the altar and its model according to all its workmanship. He's like, yeah, I like this idolatrous altar. So Urijah the priest built an altar according to all the King Ahaz had sent from Damascus. Thus Urijah the priest made it before the coming of King Ahaz. I want it delivered. I want it hand delivered. I want it built before. When I get home, I want it done. It was like when I went to Israel. I went to Israel right at the time while they were working on the church. There was a certain parts of the church were being done. I wanted to come back and have it be done. I remember, I don't want to be here when it's all happening. I want to come back to a finished product. That's kind of like what happened. That was 2014. That's kind of like what happened here. I want to come back to a finished altar. When I get back from Damascus, I want this altar built. I want it there. When the king came from Damascus, the king saw the altar. Then the king approached the altar and went up to it and burnt his burnt offering and his meal offering and poured his drink offering and sprinkled the blood of his peace offerings on that idolatrous altar. This guy's terrible. The bronze altar, which was before the Lord, the altar, he brought from the front of the house, from between his altar and the house of the Lord, and he put it on the north side of his altar. He moved the altar of burnt offering. He moves it to the side, essentially. And then King Ahaz commanded Urijah the priest, saying, upon the great altar, my new idolatrous altar, burn the morning burnt offering and the evening meal offering and the king's burnt offering and his meal offering with the burnt offering of all the people of the land and their meal offering and their drink offerings, and sprinkle on it all the blood of the burnt offering and all the blood of the sacrifice, all the stuff you're supposed to do with the altar that used to be the altar of the Lord. Do that with my altar now. But with the altar of the Lord, the bronze altar, that's going to be for me to inquire by. In other words, I'm going to use divination, which is an abomination. I'm going to figure out the future. We're going to cut animals open. We're going to examine their organs. We're going to examine their entrails, and we're going to figure out what's going to happen in the future. It's just a disgusting, disgusting idolatry. This is the worst guy. He's just the worst. This is the worst guy in the South. So Urijah the priest. Now, you'd think Urijah would stand up and just be like, no. But Urijah compromises. He did according to all that King Ahaz commanded. Then King Ahaz cut off the borders of the stands and removed the laver from them. He also took down the sea from the bronze oxen which were under it and put it on a pavement of stone. He basically makes adjustments to the holy worship items, and he cuts different parts out and moves them, and it kind of desecrates the whole situation. The covered way for the Sabbath which they had built in the house and the outer entry of the king he removed from the house of the Lord because of the king of Assyria. This is one of the worst kings. He turns to the gods of Syria, and then Ahaz goes the way of all men. Now the rest of the acts of Ahaz, which he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah? So Ahaz slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of David, and his son Hezekiah reigned in his place. And Hezekiah inherits a nightmare, a mess. Ahaz helps bring on one of the worst periods in all of Israelite history. He invites one of the greatest enemies that Israel would ever know. He dies. He's buried in the city of David. But apparently people in Judah recognize how evil he is, because in 2 Chronicles 28:27, he wasn't buried in the tombs of the kings. His son Hezekiah becomes king. Will he be any better? Will he be any better than Ahaz? Will he change the course of things in Judah? We'll take a look at that starting next time. But these are the dark times. and Judah. These are some of the darkest times Israel and Judah has ever seen. Again, it's an absolute mess. One king after another is murdered and replaced. In Israel and in Judah, this is going on. Judah's king is making a mess of things. He's leading them down a dark path of destruction. The northern kingdom is left in shambles, hanging onto its existence by a mere thread. In only a few years, they'll be gone. The southern kingdom of Judah is basically now a servant of the Assyrians. And when I look at this mess of a situation, I think what you probably all think. This is what happens when you turn away from God. This is what happens when you turn away from the Lord. You invite trouble into your life. For 200 years, the northern kingdom of Israel worshipped idols and invited trouble. They turned away from the Lord, and now it's beginning to face the consequences. God's fuse of grace toward their idolatry has been burning for 200 years. It's almost burnt out. And Judah is heading down a similar path to destruction because Ahaz is a man who trusts in man instead of the Lord. He trusts in his money. Let's bribe the foreign king, and let's do it with the Lord's offerings. Let's do it with gold from the temple. Hey, we got money in the church. Let's use it for personal advancement. That's the philosophy of people today, unfortunately, in leadership. Ahaz has led the nation into the worst idolatry it's ever seen. He's even kicked the Lord, essentially kicked the Lord out of his own temple complex. And when you kick the Lord out of your society, you better believe trouble's coming. And for years and years and years, it was looking like that's what we were doing. And that's what we are going to do. I mean, ultimately, unless there's real revival, this is the way of things. People got sick and fed up for 4 years of the absolute ridiculous stuff that was going on. But that's not going to last. The morality of this nation, there hasn't been revival. The morality of this nation is going to continue to steamroll away from the Lord unless there's revival. And they're going to continue to try. And maybe we get a little reprieve like right now. You know, you're bringing the Lord back into society a little bit, and you're appointing judges who care about spiritual matters and stuff like that. And that's a good thing. But it's got an expiration date on it. Just like what we see in the history of Israel. You see a king come, and he worships the Lord, and you just see society ultimately continue its spiral. Our society is a lot like Ahaz because it has for many years kicked the Lord out of almost everything. And when you kick the Lord out, trouble follows. And although you may not see it in this life, or you may, you'll definitely see it in eternity. You'll definitely see the consequences of it in eternity. That's the state of our culture. That's the state of Western culture. Really the state of the world in general. What Israel needs right now, and part of the reason why I read Isaiah 7, is because it points toward what Israel needs. What Israel needs is the Messiah. They need a messianic king. What Judah needs is a messianic king. And it's the same thing we need. It's the exact same thing America needs. We need the Messiah. Israel needs the Messiah. And when I look at this passage and I consider the spiritual principle of it, and it's not just it is history. I mean, one of the main points of 1st and 2nd Kings is an historical retelling of what's happening in Israel and Judah. But when I look at the spiritual principle, I see that you need to commit your life to the Lord and to his Messiah. Or else you'll face the consequences of rejecting him like Israel did, like Judah will do eventually. And those consequences may happen in this life, but they will certainly happen in eternity. Let's take our hymnals and turn to 388. 388 got us out at a decent time. I didn't do too bad. I was flew through the end of that sermon. 388. If you're not sure you're saved, come and see me, or see Brother Metcalf in the back there, and we'll get you lined up with someone who could help explain the gospel to you. If you look at your life and you're like, you know what, I do see a little compromise. Maybe it's not to such an extent, but maybe my trust in the Lord has faltered. Maybe I've taken matters into my own hand. I'm not saying you don't act at all, but you need to trust in the Lord. Maybe you haven't been trusting in the Lord. Maybe you've been trusting in man, and you want to make a change about it. You want to recommit to walking with Him today. Then you do that when we sing 388.